Welcome to Real GM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg, and in a minute, I'll be joined by Mike Shearer to preview the NBA Finals with our X Factor draft. Who are the players, coaches, concepts, anything else that are going to swing and decide this series? Let's jump in. All right, it's Real GM Radio. So excited for this episode. Mike Shearer is here from the Basketball Poetry Substack, a must-read. Right before we started recording, I got the email that you sent out your NBA Finals preview. You did your usual thing, I think, with X Factors. Am I right on that?
That's right. X Factors and key questions.
X Factors and key questions. You did it before every series of the playoffs. You're doing it obviously here before the NBA Finals, so go ahead and check that out. But speaking of X Factors, that is exactly what we're doing here. Mike, I had you in mind for weeks to preview these finals because I knew that you do the X Factors. I love X Factors. You love X Factors. Everybody loves X Factors. So we just went ahead and leaned in all the way, committed to the bit. We're doing an X Factor draft. So we're going to take turns drafting players, concepts, stats, coaches, literally whatever comes to mind. Total freedom to be creative. Very loose with the rules, but we're gonna be doing things in order to draft the things that we have a chance that can a chance to decide or swing the NBA Finals. You're the guest. I'm gonna give you the number one pick. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think I like to kind of get a little cute sometimes and like pick these like little hipster stats and stuff like that. But let's be honest, this is the finals. We got to talk about the stars first. My first pick in the X Factor draft is going to be around Haliburton's possession. And what I mean by that is the Thunder have done a better job of keeping Haliburton away from the ball than any team in the league. So NBA has a lot of cool tracking data. One of the stats that I've found kind of digging through in preparation for this was that in the regular season, Haliburton averaged just under 6 minutes of possession per game. So that's like time with the ball in his hands. And this is something that caught my eye in the previous series because it was in stark contrast to Jalen Brunson, who tends to be the ball sticks with him a little bit more. And he was averaging nearly 9 minutes, which he led the league in the regular season. And I was kind of contrasting like, hey, Haliburton gets off the ball so quickly, et cetera, et cetera. But Haliburton's 6-ish minutes in the regular season, 5.7 to be exact, dropped to 3.9 minutes in the two games that they played against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I think this is fascinating because, frankly, we all know Indiana's not going to go far if Haliburton isn't able to find a way to solve the Thunder's defense. It's really hard to solve if you can't even get the ball, right? Like if your best player is incapable of getting to the ball, that's a problem. Some of this is schematic, right? Like the Thunder bring a lot of pressure up on Haliburton. In the regular season, they spent a lot of time kind of getting the ball into like Nembhard to help bring the ball up and give Haliburton a bit of a break. Indiana also, Haliburton specifically has these tendencies to fade into the background, right? And people have criticized him for this. He's had that like one stinker of a game in basically every playoff series where he'll just randomly put up like 7 shot attempts or have 8 points. That's kind of a thing that people have noticed. This isn't like a James Harden like disappearing thing though. It's just sometimes the Pacers are so empowered as a team that like the other players will take the ball and run with it. The ball doesn't always find Tyrese Haliburton. But in this case, it's the Thunder making sure that he can't get it. And so I'll pause there and let you react to that. But I just think that like the Pacers really need to figure out a way to get Haliburton the ball either on the ball or with some off-ball stuff, setting some off-ball picks for him, let him get the ball going towards the hoop where he can make his magic happen.
I love that we're starting with Haliburton because there was going to be a Haliburton-related thing for my first pick, and I'll still do it. But you're absolutely right. In terms of his usage and the way that he's empowered and initiates stuff in this NBA Finals is going to be huge. His lowest usage rate in a game this season was a December game against the Thunder. 8.7 usage rate, which is like barely playing the game.
That's bad for role players. Yeah.
Right. It's bad for role players, terrible for star players. And then in March, in their second meeting, that went up to 19.3% usage rating, which you'd be, oh, wow, that's a big jump. It is a big jump. It's still less than Tobias Harris. It's not good. And you can see what the Thunder are doing, right? The Thunder can switch everything if they want. And they don't even have to. But they could switch everything, flatten things out. And Haliburton, I have found, if he doesn't have an obvious weak spot to pick on in terms of the opponent's perimeter defenders, he can get a little passive. I think about what was really interesting to me in that game, the Knicks, game 5 where the Knicks won. Jalen Brunson was in foul trouble in the fourth quarter, and there was just a lot of minutes with no Brunson on the court, but Karl-Anthony Towns on the court. And with Brunson off the court, the Knicks made their run. And I was kind of like, my take after that game was, I think the Knicks got kind of lucky in Brunson getting hurt and then just coming in for the final minute and a half and hitting a couple of clutch shots. And that was sort of like the perfect Brunson formula there, because without Brunson out there, Haliburton kind of just got off the ball early in possessions, ended up standing off to the side on the sideline and stuff and sort of watching stuff happen, where you would have thought, okay, well, yeah, Brunson's off the court, but just bring Cat into the action and go after him, which he's obviously capable of doing and has done. But it just, I think he has to think about it a little bit more if that guy isn't, that obvious target isn't out there on the perimeter. So what does that mean for the Thunder? They don't have that obvious guy on the perimeter. Even the guy that you would be like, Shai, he's pretty good defensively. He's not a guy that you could target, and his size and his length and his strength and all of that can be a problem for Haliburton. I'll be interested to see, though, if they just try to do it anyway. Because it's one thing to be like, we're expecting to attack guys like Brunson or Damian Lillard or Darius Garland or whoever these guys are. It's another one to go in, and then those guys are out for whatever reason, and they're like, oh, what do we do now? Where you're going into this Thunder series and you say, we know that there's no weak spots on the perimeter unless they bring Isaiah Joe in, who's not even that bad of a defender, but he would be the weak spot. But to start these games, there's no weak spot. So what do we do about it? Do they start attacking Shai early just to get him to work? Or do they say, that guy's not out there, but they're going to start their two bigs, and maybe that's a spot for us? And now we start attacking things a little bit more traditionally with 1-5 pick and roll. Hope that Hartenstein goes drop, or even if he does switch out, which he's more than capable of, but that would be sort of, we kind of still like that matchup of Haliburton on the perimeter against Hartenstein, and maybe they go there. But it's a great call out, and I think it's a great first pick, because if he's not involved, to your point, Mike, like, who else is going to win this series for Indiana? It doesn't feel possible.
Yeah, you can have, a Nesmith game. You can have a Nembhard game, but you're not going to get 4 such games in a series out of 7, right? And so it really all does start there. And your point about Shai is one I made today as well, where it's like, yeah, he is their worst defender in the starting unit, and he also received all defensive team votes this season, right? Like, it's outrageous when you think about, like, how few opportunities there are. And, tagging on to your Hartenstein thing, which is another X factor I had too, was and I'll just combine these, but like Hartenstein's minutes, I think, are going to be super interesting to watch, because he does provide the most natural place for Haliburton to attack in a conventional kind of pick and roll offense, right? And I think that Hartenstein only played like 14 minutes in their second meeting in the regular season, which is crazy when you consider that Holmgren wasn't available for either of them. So something that Coach Mark Daigneault saw in there was like, hey, like, we're just going to put him on the bench because he's just giving them too much of a way to run what Indiana wants to run, which is like this, like, pick and roll centric makes it sound old school. And that's not quite right. This brand of chaos. Everybody's running, everybody's setting screens, but Hartenstein is at the center of it all when he's on the court. And we saw his minutes drop all playoffs. They're down several in the aggregate, and he's had several games in the teens. So I don't want this to be a referendum on Hartenstein as a player. He's been super valuable to them all season long. He was invaluable to them against Denver, but this probably isn't going to be the series for him.
All right, I agree with you. And that's the scary part with Oklahoma City, where it's like, oh, Hartenstein's not working? No problem. We'll just go to any of our other looks. Yeah. Like, it's not an issue for them. Like, okay, you're playing 13 minutes a game. Not a big deal.
Exactly.
My first pick in our X Factor draft, and I'm going to get weird right away.
Oh, I love it.
The Tyrese Haliburton jump pass.
Oh, nice.
This, to me, is going to be a huge X Factor, and I guarantee you, Mike, it's going to be a storyline in this series, because it's been it's been a story thing. It's been a thing that Indiana fans will point to. And Tyrese Haliburton, he made the jump pass a bad thing into a good thing. It's this kind of his
shout
weird,
out Caitlin
like,
Cooper. Yeah.
Yep. Caitlin Cooper's been all over it. And he loves the jump pass. He's turned it into like this. It's not his main superpower, right? It's not like Spider-Man's web, where it's like, that's the thing he's known for, but it's more like, oh, he could also do like that cool, like 15-foot backflip. That's sort of the Haliburton superpower. But the interesting thing about the jump pass in regards to this series against the Thunder, Oklahoma City obviously thrives at turning teams over, right? That's their bread and butter. It's what they do. But they do it a lot with just how anticipatory they are. They know the opponent's actions. They're able to scout it. Lou Dort has been on the record about this, about how much film this team crunches defensively. And then also just their instincts are just out of this world, off the charts, just timing, instincts, all that stuff, strength, quickness, physical traits. I'm interested to see how that looks against the Pacers, though, because the Pacers are sort of this random flow offense where they do things in a manner that other teams don't really do them. They don't really follow the same patterns of other NBA offenses, and that's what takes other teams by surprise, puts other defenses on their heels so early in the series. And it's why they've been able to start every series by stealing at least one game on the road, is because it just feels like there's an adjustment period. So I say all that to just say, like, one of the key ways they do that is the Haliburton jump pass, right? He'll take that jump pass, he'll be going one way, jump, turn his body 180 degrees and throw it in a different direction. Where 99% of point guards would have thrown it on to the other side of the court. Haliburton's finding all these other angles and these other passes that other point guards don't find. And I just wonder, does this remain a superpower for him, where all of a sudden he's jump passing with his length and all this stuff past the pressure, jump passing over the pressure, finding those backdoor cutters that other teams just haven't managed to find because they're so pressured at the half court and in full court? Or does he start jump passing? The Thunder have scouted this so well and are so ready for it that it goes from superpower to, oh, this is why nobody does the jump pass, because now in the middle of the air, and by the time he's up in the air with that jump pass, you've got Lou Dort or Alex Caruso or one of these guys right in the middle of that passing lane, ready to pick it off for a pick six. I think that'll be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, that's a really fun example. And I think it's a perfect encapsulation of like the micro, whereas the macro is like, he just has to be creative to be effective in the series because he's not going to have a physical advantage, right? Like Haliburton is used to not being the fastest or the strongest guy out there. He usually succeeds by being incredibly clever and being incredibly creative, as like with the jump pass. But this Thunder team, it just has so much reactionary power. You know what I mean? Like, anything that they see coming, they're so quick, they're so long, they're so connected on a string that they can take away that stuff in a split second. And that's all you have when you're in the air, right? When Haliburton launches in the air, he just has a split second to make that window. And it'll be a fascinating test of the Thunder's reactionary skills versus Haliburton's superpower, like you said. So I think that's a really good encapsulation of like just the sheer lengths that Haliburton is going to have to go to find success, because he's never going to be blowing by guys. He's not going to be overpowering them, but he needs to find ways to think four-dimensionally in order to win. Like you said, the jump pass was verboten for so long, and then Haliburton came along and made it like part of his arsenal, a real weapon. So we'll see how it holds up.
If it does become the storyline like I predict, where the broadcast team and the pregame show are all starting to talk about it, one of these people need to hire Caitlin Cooper to do like a whole expose on it, because she's been ahead of it. You have the next pick.
So I think for number 2, I want to talk about arguably the Thunder's only defensive weakness. Leaving aside defensive rebounding, right? Which is its own thing. They basically solve whenever Hartenstein's in the game. They're good at defensive rebounding. Whenever he's not, they're terrible. So that's a thing they can solve if they so choose. I think their biggest weakness as a team is a tendency towards ball watching and overhelping, which are, close cousins in some cases. And this is all relative, right? The Thunder are historically amazing at defense in basically every facet. But if there is a way to take advantage of them, it's to throw so much movement at them that some of their guys either gamble when they shouldn't, and that would be your Alex Caruso's or your Jalen Williams, or just get caught a little mesmerized, perhaps, by everything going around them, lose track of their man, and somebody springs free on the perimeter, and that would be more Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Yeah. And one thing that I noticed in watching the regular season meetings again between these teams is like the Pacers did get some good looks from 3, particularly attacking Shai with whoever Shai was guarding, just having him run and run and run and run. Shai eventually would lose his man a couple times. Haliburton, notably, a few different times. The Pacers didn't always hit those looks, but the opportunities are there. And the Pacers are going to have to make a lot of shots. They're going to have to take and make a lot of shots this series. And I don't mean that just literally. Like, they're going to have to take some gambles of their own. They're going to have to take some strategic gambles. They're going to have to figure out ways to leverage the Thunder strengths against them. And I think this is one, right? Like, the Thunder thrive on chaos. They're out there forcing turnovers left and right. But by necessity, they're doing a lot of gambling. They're doing a lot of helping and aggressive helping and recovering. And my favorite stat in that regard is that against Minnesota, the Thunder allowed the Timberwolves to get up 15.8 corner three-pointers per game. In the regular season, the team that led the league was Phoenix, and they generated only 11.8, right? Like, the corner three for most defenses is like something you want to protect, a guard. You don't want to allow teams to shoot from the corner three. It's a very efficient shot. Even role players are generally pretty adept at it. Oklahoma City is so confident in their abilities to get out and recover and contest these shots. And they also are like, hey, we just can help fix our own defensive rebounding issues and cut off the paint from people like Anthony Edwards or, Rudy Gobert in some cases on the boards. that we don't really care if people are getting okay-ish shots from the corners that we're going to be sprinting hard out at. So they will give up some shots with their tendencies to overhelp and occasionally their tendencies to ball watch. Indiana simply has to make these at a high clip, something they've done all season or all playoffs long.
Mm-hmm. They are shooting 47% on corner threes in the playoffs. That's an elite number. They were shooting a very high rate in the regular season. Like you said, OKC gives up the most corner threes, and they do it by design. The thing is, they gave up a ton to Minnesota. Minnesota missed a lot of them. And look, the Thunder do it by design, like you said. They gave up a bunch of corner threes in the 2 regular season games they had against the Pacers. They also went 2-0 against the Pacers in the regular season, right? So they're willing to give them up because they know, hey, we'll give these up because on the flip side, we're cutting off these driving lanes. We're not letting you get these easy 2s. We're also going to make up with the possession battle with our turnovers and our steals and our free throw rate and all these things that we're willing to concede a certain amount of corner threes. But there has to be a mathematical breaking point to that, right? Where you give up too many threes and the opponent is making a too high a rate of them, where that math doesn't work out anymore. And that'll be an interesting battleground, I think, in this series because the Pacers love and are very good at creating those corner threes. The Thunder are very okay giving them up. And if the Pacers are making them at a 47% clip, making basically 50% of them, that feels like an untenable amount of corner threes, to be giving up if you're Oklahoma City. And then it kind of gets into that domino effect of, all right, so then how are we going to make up for that? Are we too far behind on the 3-point math? Do we have to start trying to create more turnovers or keep Hartenstein in the game for more offensive rebounds or just whatever it might be? It could have a really interesting domino effect on it too. So I had corner threes as one of my main X factors in this one too. The other part of this too is if you think about, I think a lot of the conversation going into the finals has been, here are the things that the Thunder are really good at that the Pacers have to account for, which is the right way to. I mean, they're a -700 favorite. Like that's how things. Like the Pacers are looking uphill. The Thunder have the high ground. That's how we have to talk about this series. But if I could posit one thing where the Pacers are uniquely better than the Thunder are, and pretty staggeringly so, it's the half-court offense. The Pacers are an elite half-court offense in offensive rating, and the Thunder are a bad half-court offense. Their best half-court offense, like what they want possessions to finish as, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at the free throw line. That's sort of their best half-court offense. If this game gets played in the half-court and slows down for pockets in this series, that could actually benefit the Pacers for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 minutes at a time if we go that far without like a turnover or like a high-paced game. And the Pacers will still ping, do like high tempo things in the half court, but they'll score in the half court, where I think the Thunder can get in the mud a little bit in the half court. And maybe the more that this, weirdly enough, you think about the Pacers as this high-paced, up-tempo team, but like maybe the more this game is slowed down and played in the half court, that could favor the Pacers. And that's sort of where the threes come in, where what you were talking about, putting guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who can fall asleep off the ball a little bit into tough situations, that's where that stuff can kind of come into play a little bit more.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is where pace as a word is sometimes used maybe a little too broadly, right? Because when we say pace, I think we're not just talking about like fast breaks and points off turnovers and that kind of thing, although that is a big part of it. But the other part is like just how quickly do you get into your sets and how quickly do you run your sets? And one thing that I like about Indiana is that no players cut lazily. And this is something that you see with so many other teams where like entire plays can be blown up because one guy simply does his 45 cut a little too slowly and screws up the timing. His defender can lag in the lane for a little bit and suddenly the offense has nowhere to go, right? That never happens with Indiana. All their guys are running at full speed all the time, exactly the way they're supposed to, controlled chaos. But they're never out there like half-assing it, right? And that to me is part of the reason why Indiana is so successful in the half court, despite kind of like, I don't want to say a lack of offensive talent, but there's not necessarily outside of Haliburton and Siakam, these guys that you're like, oh, that's a superstar offensive player, right? Even in their role. But everybody's running hard. Everybody is running with purpose. I think that's a testament to Coach Rick Carlisle and his staff, right? Like that's one of the little edges on the margins that you won't necessarily see in the box score, but it's part of the reason why they're as successful as they are. So Indiana being successful in the half court makes a lot of sense to me. And I will say Oklahoma City's half court offense has been a little bit better in the playoffs than it was in the regular season. But absolutely, if you're going to poke the very few holes that Oklahoma City has, this is one of them for sure. And I am curious to see how they can do against a Pacers defense that has leveled up as the year has gone on, right? Like the Pacers defense started off very poorly. They became much better after Nembhard came back from injury and Siakam got a little bit better integrated into a help defensive role as opposed to an on-ball stopper role where Siakam's much more suited. And actually on that note, one fun thing was that Siakam spent most of the regular season guarding Dort and helping off of him, just like trying to muck up drives and stuff. Didn't really work because Dort shot lights out against the Pacers in the regular season, and Shai still scored an insane number of points. And I'm sure we'll talk more about Shai's offensive success shortly. But so I kind of lost my train of and then in the playoffs, right? Like the Pacers defense has continually gotten better even in the playoffs. They've looked really good against some really good offenses. Like Cleveland was hurt a little bit, but they're still like a team that was, flirting with history offensively for a while. New York has a lot of individually talented shot makers. And the Pacers just keep rising to the occasion defensively. And I'm really curious, like in some ways you could look at the numbers like you have and be like the Thunder's offense, taking away the fast break stuff out of it, like is actually not going to be the mightiest foe that the Pacers have conquered so far this postseason.
I'm glad you brought up that how the Pacers just continue to get better. And you look at the defensive rating. The Thunder have a better defensive rating in the playoffs than they did in the regular season, which again is just insane.
Crazy. Bonkers.
Absolutely. I also don't know that they were tested against Denver. But if I'm going to look at specific players, it does feel like Haliburton between last year's playoffs with the Celtics targeting him relentlessly in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and then just teams continuing to target him in the playoffs this year. It does feel like he's leveled up individually a little bit. He's still not a great defender, but he's definitely fighting. He's definitely trying harder. He's not, you don't see him like just getting caught out of position necessarily or falling asleep or just kind of dying on a screen just because he's not trying hard. He's
reminds me of Curry a little bit back in the day, right? Yep.
Well said. Perfect example. Where Shai, because he's bracketed by so many great defenders, even in that Minnesota series, there was a couple of times a game where he would just fall asleep off the ball and he wouldn't do that extra thing that everybody else on the team is doing in terms of that long closeout or whatever it was. And I just wonder if, we're talking about the Pacers maybe targeting Shai a little bit. You might even want to target him more off the ball than as a primary point of attack defender, because that's where he could fall asleep a little bit more, especially in those corners where he's not Xing out or doing that long closeout in the corner or whatever. So just a random thought I had. And then in terms of the Siakam Dort part of it too, it'll be really interesting. I don't know if Chet Holmgren is an X factor for you. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but Chet did not play in the 2 regular season games, which allowed Siakam to hang out on Dort. I think in terms of matchups, they're going to play it pretty straight up, both teams in this series for the most part. I don't think we're going to have any crazy cross-matching with a big on a wing to play off and sag off and crowd the lane or anything, at least to start the series. I think you'll just have Turner on Hartenstein, Siakam on Chet, and vice versa, and then the wings will guard each other and all that stuff. I also think that the matchups matter way less in this series than in maybe any other NBA Finals I can remember, because if this game is played at that pace and this is a full court sprint for most of the game, it's just going to be cross matches and guard whoever's closer and all that kind of stuff as much as possible.
Yeah, great point.
Whenever you can take advantage of that in those instances, there's going to be a huge swing factor in this series too. But whose pick are we on?
I
think
I'm going to say mine.
I think we're with you. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to talk about Shai because we haven't really talked that much about Shai's offense yet and all the good things that he does. It feels like, and I feel like that's actually indicative of what's been going on all playoffs, right? Like Shai won MVP. Everyone was excited about it, while nobody was really. I shouldn't say nobody. Few people were willing to crown him best player in the world, but everyone was willing to acknowledge him as the MVP. And yet most of the storylines have been about the Thunder's incredible defense, all the turnovers they force, all the pressure they put on people. And that is all fair, but also maybe does a disservice to Shai, who's averaging like 38-7 in these playoffs.
Right.
And I think his game has proven to be very resilient. There were maybe a few questions about that last year where he was good in the playoffs, but not great, at least not compared to the MVP caliber standards we have set for him, right? And one of my X factors, I guess, was specifically going to be about Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nembhard's ability to avoid fouls against Shai. So we all know that Shai has a maximum level of whistle pheromones. He is going, whether you think it is ethical or not, he's excellent at getting to the free throw line and compromising defenders' positions, right? Like it is hard to be structurally sound as a defense when you have Shai kind of like slithering and worming and doing all these funky reverse pivots and stops and starts. And he just gets people out of position and gets the foul call. And I think it's amazing. Like I think we've seen, even if you look at his free throws historically, there's nothing anomalous about what he's done compared to previous greats. And in many cases, he's actually has a lower free throw rate. So I am generally pro Shai in that. While acknowledging there are certainly times where it is bad television when he's hooking somebody's elbow and falling down or whatever, right? But that's something that everyone does. It's part of the game today that I think has always been part of the game. It's just now we have really good cameras and really slow motion, and people are really in tune with that conversation. So getting that out of the way, the Pacers defense is heavily reliant upon Nesmith and Nembhard's ability to control people on the perimeter. Both those guys, we didn't see much of Nesmith on Shai in the regular season. He only played one game. And what generally didn't spend too much time on him, according to NBA's tracking data and according to, what I watched, basically. Nembhard had some issues for the same reason he had some issues with Brunson. Like I'd say that Nembhard's an amazing defender. He's probably at his worst with the really shifty guys who are doing a million pump fakes in a row and trying to spin and burrow their way to the hoop. That's probably where he's weakest. And I think he could have some problems against Shai, which means they're going to turn to Nesmith. And his ability to withstand Shai's free throws, maintain composure, and also keep him from scoring 40 in a game, which Shai nearly averaged in the 2 games against the Pacers, is critical, right? Like it's going to be the most important Pacers storyline on defense.
100%. I'm so glad you brought this up. I have Nembhard and Nesmith and their foul trouble as one of my huge X factors in this. We probably went too long without talking to him, to your point. Let's just call it for what it is. I mean, you basically said it, but Nembhard did not play Shai well in the regular season. He did not have an answer for him. It looked like a bear with oven mitts on trying to catch a salmon in a river. It wasn't working. He just couldn't get a hold of him. And he fouled him 4 times in the last meeting in March. All 4 of Nembhard's fouls came against guarding Shai. And like you said, he tends to have a harder time with guys like Shai who are a little bit stronger, where Nembhard does not have a size advantage, which he does not against Shai. And this is going to be huge because if Nembhard gets into foul trouble and then they go to Nesmith and he gets into foul trouble, and side point on Nesmith, I was wondering, it'll be interesting to see how many minutes and how many possessions Nesmith does guard Shai for, like designed possessions where he's guarding Shai. I thought, like, if he wasn't hobbled, would they have just come out the gate with Nesmith on Shai and just lived with Nembhard on Jalen Williams and said, we just got to put our best guy. Nembhard isn't working on Shai. Let's just put our best guy on Shai and then just figure out the rest. But with Nesmith hobbled, I don't know if that's what Carlisle will do. It would have been interesting to see if Nesmith were completely
and no Jarris Walker either, it should be noted, because we're probably not going to talk about him again. And I think he was somebody who did play against these guys in the regular season and would have definitely gotten a crack. But without him, there's even more pressure on Nesmith and Nembhard.
Ruled out for the first 2 games. We'll see if he can make a return at some point in the series. But the Nesmith thing is huge. And if these guys get into foul trouble, then you get that domino effect again of, okay, well, now we got to limit their minutes and who's coming in off the bench. And Ben Shepherd, is this what we're really going to be doing here? And then you start getting into some of these other guys coming off the bench, and that could be tough for them. It's a great call out. All right, I want to go. Let's talk about Siakam here. And I think this has a sneaky potential to be a really big Siakam series, because what we were talking about with Haliburton, if Oklahoma City just switches everything and tries to flatten out those perimeter actions, that could actually help Siakam. Because Haliburton, to slow down Haliburton, you want to switch, you want to flatten it out, you want to try to do those things for the most part. But I also think if you start switching that stuff and all of a sudden it's Chet or Hartenstein out on the perimeter now against Haliburton or whatever, that's going to put a smaller player on Siakam. And when Siakam has a small on him, it's barbecue chicken. It's game over. I mean, that guy's going to do whatever he wants. And so if they start, it wouldn't shock me if the Pacers tried to bait the Thunder into switching more. And the Thunder are going to do all of it. They're going to play zone. They're going to switch. They're going to play man-to-man. They're going to soft switch. They're going to switch some things and not other things. Like, they're going to throw so many looks at him. But it wouldn't shock me if the Pacers tried to bait them into switching stuff for pockets of a game and said, Oh, they're switching. Okay, very good. We got a small and Siakam. If we do A and B, we got Siakam in the post. That's C, and that's an easy bucket for Siakam against whoever, whoever's out, whoever's down there. So if this is a big Siakam series, I think that could be really beneficial for the Pacers. And it just feels like beyond Shai, beyond Haliburton, beyond these other storylines, it doesn't feel like we're talking about Siakam enough. But this is a guy who has won a championship, who Draymond said on a broadcast gave Draymond all he can handle in the 2019 finals. Siakam has leveled up significantly, obviously, since then. He's an awesome player. He could very well end up being the third best player in this series.
He needs to be if Indiana's going to make this a long series or surprise the Thunder, right? Like if Siakam's excellence is mandatory for the Pacers to get this to 7 games or win. And what I like, one thing that's fun about this series is that stylistically, this is going to be about as mid-range heavy a finals as we can imagine in today's NBA, right? Like fans of old school basketball should be very excited because there's going to be a lot of turnaround jumpers, a lot of fadeaways, a lot of, stuff happening between 10 and 18 feet in a way that you don't typically see most teams run. Siakam was a big part of that. And, side note, his evolution as a player from just being like pure speed transition as a youngster into this like kind of slow it down, plotting jump shooter towards the end of his Raptors career. And now he's like become a marksman from 3, like deadly in the mid-range, and also added the transition game back to what he was. It's kind of funny seeing him like piece together all these different things together.
You haven't called him Spicy P in a long time, huh?
Yeah. I remember when everyone was talking about his spin move and stuff like that. Right now, it's just like expected, and everyone's like, "Whoa!" Now Siakam's like a dead-eye 3-point shooter. Like, what's going on with this? But the mid-range is so fun, and the reason why it's always more prevalent in the postseason than the regular season is because it's the most defense-proof offense that there is.
Right.
It kind of doesn't. I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but the quality of defender and the quality of defense is somewhat mitigated by mid-range shot making because you can basically always get that shot off. And this is why we always see the mid-range rising into the playoffs. You're playing against better defenders, and you have players who are more capable of making mid-ranges, like Siakam. So, I don't know if this is sustainable over 7 games, and Siakam has not always had a lot of success against the Thunder in the past. It should be noted. This is not something that like he's killed them in the last few games or even the last few seasons. But to your initial point, right? Like there will be opportunities because Siakam can always get to some of these 15-foot turnarounds against smaller players. And if he's able to knock down a bunch of them, that is one very viable path to Indiana offensive success against this crazy defense.
Is there a path for disgruntled NBA fans here? Right? Because I do think that some of this, oh my God, the NBA hates this, but hey, this is actually a really great series. Stop hating on it stuff between these 2 small market teams and no Knicks and no LeBron and no Steph and whatever. I think some of it's manufactured as a straw man argument.
Yes, I tweet about this, yeah.
I am honestly, I can't figure it out. I don't know how many people in your life are like, I'm so bummed out about these NBA finals. My dad was the only one who really said anything to me, and he was like, so this Thunder team's pretty good, huh? And I was like, yep. And that was sort of the extent. He wasn't I'm so mad that Oklahoma City's in the final. Like he didn't care. He's like, oh, this team's pretty good, huh?
The only conversation that's happening less often than that one is who's the face of the league, which is the one I can't stand to have. Like no one in real life is like, oh, I wonder who's going to be the face of the NBA tomorrow. That has never been words that any like normal fan has ever uttered. So I agree with what you're saying.
You have the extremely online conversation, which you're not even sure how much of it is real or not, and then the actual conversation that people are having in real life. And it was the same thing about like, oh, everybody hates watching this Thunder team, and I'm like, most people in my life don't know anybody on the Thunder enough to hate them. To hate something implies that you know them intimately, but nobody knows them, and so I don't really know how much of these arguments are online arguments and in my definition fake arguments or real life arguments that people actually care about and are talking about. That said, I do think that there's a path for maybe that disgruntled NBA fan to come in because it might be the same person complaining about, oh, boring NBA finals, might be that, like, what's the Venn diagram, the middle part of that Venn diagram of people who also say the league is overrun with 3-point shooting and this isn't basketball and all this. It's like, hey, tune into this one and you'll see a lot of mid-range jumpers, and you should be happy about that because that's what you were complaining about, despite the fact that these teams are from smaller markets. Indiana, how many times would they be the biggest market in an NBA Finals series? it might only be this one, right? Like,
Yeah, Memphis. I don't
Memphis
know.
might be, Memphis might be it. So good for the Pacers being the big market here, big city Pacers.
Hey, in 49 other states, it's just basketball, so
That's right.
In Indiana,
You have the
I
next pick.
think, well, one of the things I was going to say about that, and I think just change topic a little bit, but something that you said sparked it was I think this is gonna be a very telegenic series, right? So like you talk about this is gonna be like fun. And like I think there's gonna be a lot of like superficial things that are super fun that the average fan should be drawn to, even if they think like, oh, there's no big names. Where's LeBron? Where's Steph? Like I still think that people who enjoy basket, if they turn these games on for just a few seconds, I think they're gonna be really excited because there's so much happening. The Pacers are the best off-ball movers in the league. There's never a time where it's one guy dribbling, everybody else standing still. Like that's super rare. And the Thunder obviously are just like this multi-headed hydra on defense. Guys are digging down from out of nowhere. They're doubling from crazy positions. They're always getting deflections. And like, these aren't boring turnovers. They're not forcing like shot clock violations or ball out of bounds. Like these are live ball turnovers that lead to highlights, right? Like I think the game 1, game 2 highlight reels are going to be spectacular. I think that's going to hopefully draw people in. As long as it's not like thunder blowout, right? Like I think that there's a possibility of that. No offense to Indiana fans. That is a possibility that I'm a little nervous about. But if the games are close-ish, I think the style of play is going to be amazing. And I think there's a lot of meat on the bone for like diehards like you and me and our, your listeners too, right? Like these are one thing we haven't talked about at all yet. And I think that we should is these are like 2 of the best coaches in the league.
Yep.
And Rick Carlisle and Mark Daigneault is like, Daigneault's one of the brightest young coaches in the league. Carlisle's one of the brightest old coaches in the league. I think Daigneault has not had a perfect playoff resume, but his sins have typically been sins of activity where like, he's like, we need to do all these things. Like we have to change these lineups. We have to be fouling up 3 with 15 seconds left to meet. Like there are things you can be like, Daigneault hasn't pushed the right button necessarily, but they're pretty few. And they tend to be him pushing buttons. And I'd rather have the coach who's out there coaching than the coach who's just like sitting back, being like, let the process play out, large sample size stuff. Like, I don't think there's time for that in the playoffs, especially not in the finals. And Carlisle obviously has a history as a major, he keeps the overdogs on their toes, as the Miami Heat know from his Dallas Mavericks tenure, right? Like Carlisle is at his best when he's the heavy underdog, and he's got like some fun things he can try that he's been cooking up since like December to throw at the Thunder just in case they played again in the finals. And I think these are 2 guys that are going to be doing a lot of stuff below the already very exciting surface level stuff. These 2 coaches are going to be cooking up a lot of stuff under the waves that are going to be really fun for everybody who are really paying attention to watch.
Yeah, these are the coaches that can do the obvious, hey, really cool sideline out of bounds play design, right? Like that sends Twitter, like that lights up Twitter and like, this is the best coach ever. I call it the Brad Stevens effect.
That's right.
And both of these coaches could do that thing, but they also do that in terms of the cooking up metaphor. It's like they've been reducing a sauce like on low for 12 hours to use in their for dinner later, right? They've been cooking it since 6 a.m. and it's
the simmer's almost done. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And it's like I don't want this to break or else I have to start over or whatever. I don't know. So I was like watching too much of The Bear, I guess. But I'm glad you brought up coaching because I definitely had it as one of my X factors. So we're just going to talk about it. But the Carlisle part of it, he has hit every right button. He has been dominant in these playoffs so far.
It's a hockey goalie hot streak. That's what's going on with Carlisle right now.
100%. And it's why I brought up earlier, like it wouldn't shock me if Nesmith was healthy, if he would have just started the series with Nesmith. Just one little thing, right? Just one little thing that you didn't really expect, but that he's been thinking about for a couple of months now. It's like, nope, I've already kind of decided to do this, even though the series just started. And it wouldn't shock me if we see a bunch of those things early in this series. Carlisle's won a championship, as you rudely and unnecessarily alluded to.
I was living in South Florida at the time too, man, so I feel that pain immensely. But I also remember what he was doing quite vividly.
Can TJ McConnell be the JJ Barea of this series? And why does it have to be him? No, coaching's going to be huge. But,
and their staffs. I do want to take 1 second to shout out, like head coach is one of my kind of like pet peeves isn't quite right, but like everybody attributes success and failure to the coaches. It's kind of like the quarterback in the NFL a little bit, where like they get a huge amount of success and the blame, but really like the average coach is so reliant upon their staff, most of whom, have handfuls of assistant coaches at various levels that are doing so much of the work that we just like don't frankly have the time or even the knowledge to properly appreciate. Like you only see the tip of the iceberg, and the tip is the head coach, right? Like you have no idea what else everybody else is doing under there.
Yep. I always say about coaching, and it applies to the whole staff, we see about 5% of what real coaching is. And it's so easy for a fan to be like, you should have called a timeout there. And because they didn't, this coach stinks. Whereas the actual stuff in NBA coaching is way harder to measure than it is in like the NFL, for instance, where you literally see the product of a coach's decision on every single play. But I'm gonna say that coaching was my pick because I had it written down there. So I'll let you get another pick here if you have something else.
Yeah, no, one last point about the coaching, I think, is just that Daigneault is an amazing coach and Carlisle is an amazing coach. But if this series goes 7 games, we're going to look back and be like, Carlisle clearly outcoached Daigneault, right? Like, I think that's an important thing to acknowledge is that, like, I don't expect that necessarily to happen, although I have a healthy respect for the Pacers and their ability to level up against, like, who they're playing against, right? But, like, Daigneault has more clubs in the bag. He's done a better job of picking them. If this series goes for a long time or Indiana has success, like Rick Carlisle is going to be reason number one.
And he also has been in the finals as a player where, and so is Siakam, right? But if there's a coach who can relate to his team, hey, this is what it's like. This is the big stage. Be prepared for X, Y, and Z. It's Carlisle. Daigneault has none of that knowledge to lean on. And so you wonder, okay, I don't expect the lights to be really bright for the Thunder, for the record, but you do wonder if that might be a thing in game 1 where it just feels like maybe the Pacers more comfortable in the finals despite having to start on the road than the Thunder are on this stage. It's just a thing I'm looking at.
Yeah. All right. The last X factor that I had written down, although I can always make something up if I need to, but the last one I had written down, and we touched upon it a little bit earlier, is like, what level of physicality is going to be allowed in these playoffs? And this is by no means an indictment of the referees or anything like that. It's just simply like the tone is usually established pretty early. What gets called a foul in one game has not always translated to the next. It's been very crew dependent, I would say, right? Like I'm not sure that the crews have necessarily. I think games have generally been called pretty consistently within a game. They have not necessarily been called that consistently game to game to game. And I think that particularly for teams like the Thunder who foul a lot, get away with a lot of physical activity, but foul a lot and can get themselves into trouble. And the Pacers, who are also very physical defensively and whose 2 best players, Nembhard and Nesmith, have had histories of foul trouble. Like, I think that, like, seeing what level the refs allow is going to dictate so much of how the game is played going forward. And that's not something that's easy to quantify necessarily, right? Like, yeah, we could go look at like free throw rates or whatever, but I think just given how much more hitting there is in the playoffs than the regular season, seeing what the refs allow and how consistent it is game to game to game is going to become a big storyline, whether we like it or not. There's nothing I like less than talking about the refs because I think that they're always trying their hardest. Right. I think the league does as good a job as humanly possible, considering that these are humans out there reacting to insanely talented, fast, freaky, athletic people doing insanely talented, fast, freaky, athletic things. So I have no complaints with the reffing, but it will be a storyline in a series that I expect to be as physical as this one.
Does higher physicality benefit the Thunder or the Pacers, do you think?
This is probably going to go against most people say, but I think it's going to be the Pacers because I think the Thunder are sort of like Draymond Green in the sense that like they already get away with so much. You know what I mean? Like they know what works for them. They're going to foul a lot. They don't really care because they know they get away with 3 fouls for every one that happens. I'm not sure that the ref's whistle will necessarily change what they do as a team. And they have so many redundant parts defensively, right? Like, oh no, Lou Dort has foul trouble. He was first team all defense. Let's bring in Alex Caruso, who is at the same position, but also a better defender. You know what I mean? Casey Wallace is out there. Like they have so many good defenders that foul trouble is a little less meaningful for them, in my opinion. Whereas the Pacers are just so dependent on Nembhard and Nesmith to be able to put up any resistance at all on the perimeter. No offense to Ben Shepherd, who's good at like full court, but not necessarily as good at just like stopping somebody in the half court. You know what I mean? Right. Like it's those 2 guys. And if those 2 guys have problems with fouls early on, if they get called for anything ticky-tack, and they also do a lot of stupid stuff. Let's be honest. Like Nesmith and Nembhard both have a tendency to make fouls that I'm just like, what were you even thinking? If they stay out of there, if they are allowed to play more physically than maybe they'd get away with in the regular season, I actually think that's to the Pacers' benefit because they are like the 2 legs holding up a 3-legged chair defensively for the Pacers. And if one of those goes down, they're gonna be in a lot of trouble.
This is not my pick, but I at least want to mention it because we haven't we've talked about it a little bit more around it, but the turnover battle is obviously going to be a thing.
Yeah.
It's the thing every show and every preview is leading with, which is why I think you didn't lead with it and why I didn't lead with it.
Yeah.
It's obviously important. I'm sorry we didn't mention it very specifically yet. But to me, when I talk about the turnover battle, what we're really discussing isn't, part of it is Lou Dort gets a steal at half court, kicks it ahead to Shai for an easy layup thing. What we're really talking about, though, is the possession battle. And that's the big thing there. Both of these teams are elite at turning the ball over, at not turning the ball over, and elite at turning their opponents over, and have elite turnover margins, and therefore usually win the possession battle for that reason. But with the Thunder, they're obviously super elite at it, and the Pacers are merely very good at it. So that possession battle is going to be a marker that we're watching every game and looking at in the box score after every game. That's not my pick, though. My last pick here, Mike, is I'm going to go Thomas Bryant.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go Thomas Bryant here. Thomas Bryant had a nice close to the Knicks series. He was mostly very bad in that Knicks series. And he's going to be their backup center option here, at least probably to start this series. And how he holds up against that Thunder front line as they toggle between Hartenstein and Holmgren and whatever else that they're going to throw at him, whether there's Jalen Williams minutes or whatever it is, heck, Kenrich Williams minutes. It just feels like Thomas Bryant is at a disadvantage in all of it. And if the Thunder want to go really small with Jalen Williams at the 5 or whatever other lineup that they have, obviously that's going to be an issue for Thomas Bryant, who struggles defensively in those kinds of settings. But it's how many minutes can they get from Bryant? Feels like it's just the first question to when do they eliminate the Thomas Bryant minutes altogether?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Right? And so maybe the Thomas Bryant thing is maybe is an X factor, but the real X factor here might be Obi Toppin, who feels like the natural successor to the Thomas Bryant minutes of, okay, well, we can't play Bryant. We don't have Bradley, so we're just going to play Siakam and Turner, and then Obi Toppin is our third big, and we're going to just try to get through all 48 minutes with those three guys, splitting them up as however we have to figure it out. So this is probably the Obi Toppin X factor. This could be a really important series for him and how he holds up defensively. He has moments in these playoffs where he can get out on the perimeter and switch a little bit and play a little bit more of that small ball kind of look. And he's going to have a really big series, I think. At least not from a points perspective necessarily or even a production, but just like being good enough defensively to not be a target. And like I said, he's had moments in these playoffs where he's been that.
Yeah, I was on record once upon a time as saying Obi Toppin was the worst defender in the NBA. I have softened on that stance a little bit. I think Indiana's system is just so much better for him where like you've always got when he's on there with Miles Turner, Miles Turner is protecting the rim. He hasn't played a ton of small ball center this year where I don't remember it, but I think he actually played a little bit more last year maybe. But to your point, like I do think Thomas Bryant is not going to be able to survive out there. I don't think he brings enough offensively to compensate for his defensive deficiencies, whereas at least Toppin does. And maybe we'll see some Tony Bradley too. I thought looked better than Thomas Bryant for large chunks of the Knicks series. But Toppin specifically at center, I think his biggest weakness is really on the glass. But the Thunder aren't a huge glass-eating team. And if Hartenstein's in the game, I don't think we're going to see Toppin at 5. I think it's going to be one of the bigger bodies. So I think that they will turn to Toppin at center, at least at some point in the series once, Thomas Bryant has been rendered unplayable, which I don't think will take all that long. And then we'll see because Toppin's weaknesses are not so bad, I would say, as the Thunder in general. Yeah, you don't want him necessarily defending in space or anything like that, but you could say that about basically all of the Pacers centers. So you may as well take somebody who can bring a lot more offensively. And yeah. But I do think by the end we're going to be like, wow, Tony Bradley ended up playing more minutes than Thomas Bryant. That's weird. How'd that happen?
Yep. As long as he's healthy, he should be out there more.
Yeah.
All right. I know you were out of your X factors, but I have one more thing for you before we get out of here. Basketball lineage, basketball history, the basketball gods, the love of basketball, karma. Is this an X factor? Because you see, like in college football all the time, like when Alabama or the Miami Hurricanes or somebody like in a big game, you get all the alumni coming out, and they're all like just on the sidelines, just watching these games on the sidelines, supporting the team. They come off, and then you just got like these old head players being like, "Hey, young kid, like, you know, keep it up out there," or whatever. The Thunder don't have this. The Thunder do not have this, right? The Thunder are a brand new franchise. They have completely disassociated, and rightly so, from the Seattle team. The Pacers have a long lineage of basketball history, right? And I just think like sports history outside of just the NBA, right? Is Larry Bird going to be in the building for some of these Pacers games? Is Reggie Miller going to be? I mean, Reggie Miller most certainly will be, I think. I don't know, just will Roy Hibbert just show up? You know, will like we've already seen Lance Stevenson.
There, you know?
Yep, we've already seen Lance Stevenson here.
Yeah.
Could Peyton Manning show up? Right? Like, could somebody?
Danny Granger. Yeah,
Danny Granger.
Well,
I feel like if I'm the Pacers, I am reaching out to all of them, and I'm like, sidelines, courtside, suites, pregame availability, postgame availability, locker room access, whatever you guys need. We want to surround and infuse our team with as much basketball history and lore, and just sort of like that scene in Space Jam where everybody puts their hand on the basketball and just sucks up all the powers from the basketball. We want to try to manufacture that with this Pacers team. Am I crazy in thinking that this could be an X factor? If you just fill up the Indiana Pacers arena with as much basketball history and athletic greatness as possible.
Well, shout out. I'm super glad you brought this up because I just saw something from a longtime Pacers reporter named Scott Agnes, who wrote an article a few days ago about the celebrities that the Indiana Pacers reached out to, right, to bring them in for games 3 and 4.
Yeah, Mike Epps.
So, Mike Epps, Jesse Eisenberg, Vivica A. Fox, a bunch of, Colts players, Caitlin Clark, and a bunch of Fever players. Indy 500 drivers.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. They totally agree with you. And I think, Indiana might not have the gross star power of like New York City, for example.
Right.
But I bet they could compete with Oklahoma City. So
yes, I think they don't have a Timothy Chalamet, right?
That's right.
I mean,
that's right.
Do you hope that Caitlin Clark is injured for a little bit longer so that she can show up to your home games for games 3 and 4? Maybe.
Yeah. Conditioning days. That's all it is, right? Like she's healthy, but she's ramping up the conditioning before she gets back.
Right. She's like, hey, do you really want to risk it this early in the WNBA season? I'm like, you need to. So yeah, I would be doing that quite a bit if I were the Pacers because the Thunder cannot compete with it. Like I looked up Thunder, I Googled like famous Thunder celebrity, and it's Bill Hader, who I love, but like,
that's
wouldn't even
one
be
name
mentioned at Madison Square Garden, right? Like, so.
No. That's a good point. But to the Thunder's credit, right? Like they bring their own mystique with their fans. Like say what you want about the Thunder, but that's a heck of a home crowd. So
it is.
They will not be lacking in energy. That's for sure.
They will not. Anything else come to mind before we sign off here?
Whew. No, I mean we covered a lot of ground. I think I do want to just like reiterate for anybody who is on the fence about whether they should care about this. I'd say give it a shot. Like I think this is going to have so much. This is just going to have so much for any basketball fan, whether it's style of play, whether it's somebody looking for like crazy tactics or funky plays. Like, don't forget about the Pacers 4 verticals play that they love. Jenny Busick, the assistant coach, came up with. Like they're going to do, these teams are going to do stuff that, we've rarely seen. And like something interesting is going to happen. Maybe it is the Thunder have 4 straight blowouts. And then we'll look back and be like, this is the start of the next dynasty. Like the era of parity is here. And also the era of parity is over. Or, like that is going to be its own interesting macro storyline eventually, even if it's not interesting right this second. But the flip side is it will be really fun right now, where like the Pacers do make it feisty. They do have a couple hot shooting nights from Nembhard and Toppin, and they're able to ride some unlikely shot making, which they have kind of all playoffs, and keep the series close, keep entertaining, and maybe come out on top. Like I think I am not so quick to dismiss the Pacers' chances of making this an interesting series. As I think a lot of people have been. I've seen a lot of Thunder in 5, and I think that's probably like totally fair, reasonable thing to say when you're looking at just the numbers, but I just call it vibes, right? Like I just feel like the Pacers have at least one more game in them, and just as a objective basketball fan, like I'm just rooting for as many games as we can. Right. So I hope it goes 7, whatever happens, because after that it's gonna be a long break.
It is. I'm with you. I think the adjustments in between games are going to be fascinating. This is going to be real adjustment coaching basketball. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, that's really huge. And I think you don't have a team like last year's Mavericks, where you're going to be calling out the superstar for a lack of effort on the defensive end. Even if some of these guys could get attacked defensively, it's like we said earlier, it's not going to be because of lack of effort. You don't have the Celtics thing from last year, which is like, oh, all they do is take threes and it's boring, which I agree with, and I thought it was boring. But I'm also a hater.
In your unbiased opinion, yeah.
Right, correct. These are two teams that are really fun to watch, regardless of market size, regardless of whatever you think. And there's going to be a ton of effort, a ton of great stuff. If the Thunder sweep them, if this thing goes to 7, whatever, I think these games are going to be really competitive on a possession-to-possession basis. And I just think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And the NBA is forced to at least recognize that there's other star players in not big markets, and they're going to be forced to tell us some stories that I think a lot of people haven't heard before, right? A lot of casual fans don't know a ton about this thing. And thank God, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not related to anybody on the Pacers.
Yeah. Poor
Because it
Nikhil.
felt like that was the only thing that anybody could say about Shai against the Timberwolves. All right. Mike Shearer, basketballpoetry.com. Check it out over there. Subscribe. It is, I'm telling you, a must read. He's a must listen when he's on LGM Radio.
Totally agree.
Mike, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.